Kyle from Pixel Penguin Press, and one of the questions we get a lot is, how do I print one of your traveler's notebooks? And be it the personal size or the pocket size or your B6 size, it doesn't matter, they all work the same. The first thing you need to do is get Acrobat Reader. It's a free program. You can get it from Adobe quite easily. I'll link it in the description below. It's also linked in all of our how to print my papers documents for all of our products. And I believe it's linked in many of our products themselves. So it's widely available. You can grab it from anywhere you like. So the first thing is to open up one of your traveler notebooks. You'll see that I've chosen the October one. I happen to have chosen the Monday start. I could have chosen the Sunday start. It doesn't matter. I've chosen the Jade Green. It doesn't matter if I'd chosen that one or the Sky Blue or the Perfect Pink or Modern Gray. They all work the same. The first thing you're going to notice in your file, which might be confusing, is that none of the pages seem to be in any order that makes sense. And that's just because they're designed in a way that when you print it, all you have to do is stack them and print them. Sometimes you might get a printable from another shop that has all the pages in order when you see it, but when you go to print that, you have to make it into a booklet, and that can be a little bit complicated in itself. So we just try to make it as easy as possible for you to print these booklets without any hassle. So all you have to do is open up your file and hit print. Depending on your printer, you might have different settings here. If you have a duplex printer or a double-sided printer that does these things automatically, all you have to do is, select that checkbox and that will be perfect for you. But if you've got a top-loading or a bottom-loading printer that doesn't do double-sided on its own, we're going to have to print one side of the page first and then the next side. And the easiest way to do that is to print all your odd pages and then print all of your even pages. And that may vary depending on your printer. So you probably want to do a test run on just one or two pages to figure out how your printer can handle the double-sided printing. So print a page and then put it back into your printer and see where the printing ends up the second time around. Printers generally fall into two different camps. There's the top-loading printer and the bottom-loading printer. The top-loading printer settings are pretty simple. Select pages print all. You want to print your odd pages only. Make sure you're set to actual size so nothing is scaled. And make sure you're on auto portrait so that everything is centered up in the page. After that, you're going to hit print, and they're going to run through all the pages that are odd. And since it's a top-loading printer, generally your print is going to end up on the top side of the page as well. So all you need to do is take your stack and flip it from long edge to long edge, just like the long sides of the paper. Just flip it that way. If you flip it the other way, you might get upside down printing. So flip it long edge to long edge and then put it back into your printer. Then all you need to do is go back into your print dialog, hit print again, and this time you're going to use even pages only. And you're going to print all of the pages that are even, and that's going to end up on the back side of your pages. Everything will be in order. It'll be fantastic. Now, if you have a printer that's bottom loading like myself, there is a slightly different thing you need to do, which can make it a bit easier for getting things in order. So you can do the same thing. First thing you're going to do is want to print all your odd pages. So select odd pages, but then you're going to see this dialog here that says reverse pages, and that's going to make sure that you print from the last page in the document to the first. And that will make sure that when we go to print the even pages, the final product is all in order. So first you're going to do the exact same thing. You just hit print for all your pages that are odd in the reverse order. And when that's done, take those pages, and because it's a bottom loading printer, you're not going to need to do any flipping because the way the printer works, the ink will actually be on the correct side as it is. So you can take that and put it back in the tray just as it is. come back into your print dialog, and this time you're going to print all your even pages, but turn off reverse pages when you do that. That'll ensure that when your final product comes out, everything is in the exact order that you need it to actually be a booklet. And then hit print. So after that's done printing, I'll show you how to properly cut and assemble the booklet, which is dead simple on its own. Okay, so now you have your printed pages of the October Traveler's Notebook, or whichever Traveler's Notebook you've got, whether personal or whatever. And all the pages have come out from the PDF in that jumbled order. But now that they're stacked, you can see that they come in the correct order. You can see that this is week one, or we go into the days here. Sunday. Oh, back up here. So you can see now it's like, oh, you got Monday and then Tuesday, and all your days are in the correct order now that they come out in a stack. And you're ready to trim them. But before you trim them, I find the best thing to do is actually to fold all your pages individually. So what I'll do is instead of taking one at a time, because that can be kind of slow, which you can if you're very meticulous, I just take 2 pages at a time, and I'll fold them in half, set them aside over here. I'll take the next 2 pages from the middle here, I'll fold them in half, and then I will set them aside. I've already pre-folded the entire booklet so that everything is in line. And when it comes to cutting, there's 2 different ways you can do it. You can do each page individually using the crop marks just right here and here, and looking at your fold lines to make sure they're right on your fold, which it is. And you can do that per page if you'd like, or you can do it all at once. And there's different reasons for doing it different ways. So when you do it so that each individual page is cut, you'll end up with a booklet that once you fold it, you end up with what's called creep. And that's this little bit of extra page that sticks out. And that's because when the book gets folded, the inner pages come out further than the outer pages. So you always end up with extra bits of paper sticking out. And personally, I don't really like the look of it. I'm not too concerned about it, but depending on how thick the booklet is, you'll get more and more creep. And if you want a nice straight edge, the only way to do that is to cut this all at one time. But first, I'll show you how to do the individual way using the template that comes along with every one of our printables. So you grab the first sheet and you pre-fold it, as I mentioned, lay it flat, and then look at the crop marks here and line them up with your ruler or your guillotine or your, one of those slider slicers, which are also pretty nice. And you line up with your crop marks, and you'll notice that with those guillotines and slicers, what ends up happening is you slice off this entire sheet right here. This whole piece comes off. With a ruler, you don't have to do that. You can cut a window and you don't lose any crop marks. But with the guillotines and sliders, you always end up cutting off the entire side. And that can make it hard to trim your final side. So I'm just still following the crop marks that are here, but once I cut this page off, I'm going to have no more crop marks. I have nothing to gauge where I need to cut this final line to make sure it's the right size. So what I've done is provided a trimming template, and you just trim this out ahead of time. It's just a box. It's very easy to trim out. You know exactly the size that you need. All you need to do is line it up with your printable, and this works for any of the sizes we do, whether it's pocket or personal, and in the future B6, we will have a template that shows you exactly where you need to cut in the final cut. And that way you know that your booklet is the exact personal size. So now you've got a booklet that is the correct size. Now, if you wanted to print it so you don't have that creep, if you want to cut it so you don't have that creep, and you do it all at once, the process is a little bit different, and you actually don't need the template for that in that case. But it can be handy. I guess still, if you're using the guillotine, you will end up trimming off more than you need to. Like, you'd end up slicing off this whole side. But since I'm using a ruler and a razor blade, I'm not going to have that issue when I do this. The only issue I'm going to have is that I'm going to have to cut a number of times. Is this going to slide on me? Yeah. I'm going to have to cut a number of times through this paper. That's just because I'm cutting through 16 pieces of paper right now. One thing to watch out for is make sure you cut very far out of your print zone all the way across, because you want to make sure that you aren't leaving any strangling connecting paper. Anything that can hang your book up at the end. And I think I'm already through. I'm just kind of making sure at this point. I usually start with the top and bottom edges, and I do my final edge at the end. So everything's still lined up, my paper's still lined up. I'm going to continue cutting and cut the bottom side just the same way as the top. Now if you'd use the guillotine and chop these off, you'd still be in the same boat as using the template to finish it off. And that could probably make it a little bit easier as well, a bit quicker. But you just use the template the same way you would as if you were doing each page individually. So this is already, I think, cut through. Actually I don't think I cut enough here, so I'm going to cut a little bit more. As long as I can kind of hear that cutting. Okay, that's all the way through. So the final step will be cutting the edge. So then you need to fold your book to do that, to get rid of any of this extra creep that's going to result in your booklet. And just make sure this is nice and flat so that your crop marks are still there to use. Now if you had cut this off with your guillotine on either side, what you'd have to do is take the template, instead of using it this way, just pre-fold it and then put it right along the edge. And then you could use that with your guillotine or with your slider and just cut off this little bit of extra at the end. But I'm going to use the ruler. I'm going to use the crop marks. They're already there. Just make sure all the pages are all in line. And then I will just take this ruler and trim off the excess in the final cut. And again, I'm going to try to cut as much as I can past the actual crop marks so I don't get any straggling connections. And this is going to take a few more cuts for me because I'm cutting through twice as much paper. I can still hear it cutting the paper, so I know that I'm not all the way through. I'll just kind of keep going until it's all the way through. And I'm cutting on a cutting mat, which is quite nice and handy, but if you don't have a cutting mat, you could cut on like an old magazine or perhaps a piece of cardboard or something, or a piece of wood. If you don't have a nice smooth cutting mat like this is actually a sewing, like a rotary blade sewing cutting mat that I happen to have around. And you can see actually I still have like a little bit of a corner still connected. There's not too much of a big deal. I can just actually cut that last little bit by hand here. There, and it pops out. So now you've got this booklet that has none of that excess creep here. It's a nice smooth edge. You can see there's no extra paper sticking out. All the edges are nice and clean. The only downside to trimming your booklet so that there's no creep is that you end up with smaller margins on the middle pages. And that's because the pages in the middle are actually smaller. And that's because it's making up for this bit of space in the fold. So your first pages will have the 5mm margin that the booklet is designed for, whereas the middle pages will end up with just a couple millimeters of margin because it's been trimmed off so that it can look nice and straight edged like this. But if you don't mind a little bit of creep and you would prefer the 5mm margin so that it looks nice and clean throughout, like so, I would recommend cutting each page individually and then putting your booklet together and folding it. You'll end up with that creep, which could be about an eighth of an inch to a quarter of an inch, depending on how many pages or how thick the paper is in your booklet. But then all your margins will be the same on every page. If you have any questions about how to put this together, how to print it, how to cut it, just let us know. You can reach us on our Etsy website, Pixel Penguin Press, or you can reach us on our personal website, pixelpenguinpress.com. Just reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you in any way we can.